Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, where leaders learn from leaders. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy Chad Fellers, we have casual talk about the challenges and successes in medical affairs with the most exciting and impactful professionals in pharma. As always, we have another great one for you today, so stick around.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles. I am your host, Chad Fellers, along with my nifty sidekick, Mary Morton. How are you, Mary?
I'm terrific, as always. How are you?
I'm good. We haven't had the chance to connect since last week. I know we're both baseball fans. Did you, by chance, watch the Razorbacks play the Longhorns? Your favorites?
I'm guessing there is zero chance we won that game if you're bringing it up.
But it was the number one. You're the number one seed or in the nation right now, and we happen to sweep you. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I want to make sure. You could probably go on YouTube and watch that. It was a great weekend. Really enjoyed it. So I want to make sure that you had awareness of that. So I didn't know if you want to talk about that for today or not. It was wow, and our softball team is number one as well too. So I really don't know how to do that. Although I would say Arkansas has a great leader, and it's quite honestly, it's a great segue into our conversation today, right? When we're talking about leadership, the development of the Arkansas Razorbacks, who could be maybe the College World Series champions this coming year in Omaha. Hopefully, we cross your fingers with that. I know I'm talking to a couple. Hey, don't give me that kind of finger. Yeah. Hey, I've got that. We don't use those kind of fingers on this show, Lee
yes,
and Mary.
We do.
So
if you bring on a Texas Longhorn on that one, you're not going to have much of a chance on that one, Chad.
Fair enough.
That one. Outside of that one, I also, you got to give some kudos out there also to the Raiders. So,
oh gosh, I have opened up a can of worms here on this. It was an attempt of trying to make a segue with that, but honestly,
we're ganging up on you today.
Yeah, I know this is going to be a great conversation. We're really it is around the power in prioritizing leadership development and succession planning, specifically within medical affairs, right? I mean, that's something I think I can't wait. I think this is going to be great, regardless of leadership position you're in, or even as an individual contributor as you're moving forward with this. We have my friend, former colleague, Lee Gervitz, joining us today. So, Mary, why don't you give us a quick introduction to let our listeners know just who they're going to be listening to today.
Okay, I'm glad to. So please welcome to the show, Lee Gervitz. So if you're not watching, you didn't see, Lee and I both threw up our hook 'em horn sign because the both of us did graduate from the University of Texas with a bachelor's in biology. He also went on to get another bachelor's degree at UT, went on to Texas Tech, which is, if you weren't watching, he did throw up his Red Raiders guns up.
Yeah, guns up.
Right. Okay. Where he got an MBA as well as a PhD in medical physiology. I also just learned that he went to high school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where I lived up until about 5 years ago. So we've got so much in common. But Lee has a very impressive background. And I don't want to give too much away because we're going to talk a lot about all of this. But he has recently joined Xenon Pharma, where he is heading up medical affairs there. So welcome to the show, Lee. So glad to have you.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you, Chad. It's such a pleasure to be on the show with you. And I just love the success that you've had with this podcast. And I remember, Chad, when you were first starting off on the concept of, hey, I think I'm going to try this, and just to see how much success both of you have had in this, it's great to be invited to it. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's the whole premise around this, and we continue to say is, leaders learning from leaders. How do you how can you accelerate your journey with that instead of trying to figure it out on your own? And it's people like you that have poured into me, and just want to be able to have that same type of opportunity to extend that beyond to pour that out. So thanks so much for hopping on. Or, well, number one, for the investment you've made in me, but then also your willingness to share some of your story.
So, Lee, if you're up for it, I've got just quick fire questions for you.
I like them. Bring it.
All right. Super. Okay. So, what would be your walk-up song?
Oh, I have two. I have two walk-up songs. I alternate between the two of them. One of them is U2 Desire, and then the other one is Lowrider. All my friends in the lowrider.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
I
it.
did not know
Those are
that
the two.
one.
Yep.
Um, so on Desire, my roommate and I used to listen to that song before we would leave to go take a final exam
Yeah, it's a great
in
song.
college, my roommate in college. And Lowrider is crazy. I have to know why.
It's all my friends. It's that concept of we're all in this together, right?
I
We're
love
all going in
that.
on this journey together. So let's go.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
Lee is full of very useful trivia and then useless trivia as well too. Like I've learned some things from him. Like the first time we actually came together, I just started with a company. He's like, "Do you want to learn how to hold your breath for like 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, or how the Navy SEALs do it?" And I, I'll be darned if we didn't go through the exercise, and I held it for the longest time ever. Right. So he's very well studied. I know he likes to read tons of books, has 20 to 30 that he tries to read per year. So always on this leadership and knowledge journey. And we're going to actually get into some of that
Yeah,
stuff too, and what really
I love
drives him
that.
with
Yeah,
that. So
20 a year is the target, without a doubt.
yeah. Yeah. So with that, Lee, give us just a little bit about your leadership journey before we get started.
Yeah, my leadership journey, I've been incredibly fortunate through my career in terms of the opportunities that I've had and the opportunities that my family has been willing to go on as part of that journey. I started off as an MSL, and the best job in the industry without a doubt, and continues to be the best job in the industry. From there, moved into um, started my tours around the world, would be a way to describe it. I went to Europe for the first time to build an MSL team. That was with UCB. Was there for a few years. We came back, was a medical director, learned how to be a medical director, how to lead in that capacity with an organization. After that, we went back to Europe, and then I switched to the commercial part of the business and was a new product planning and portfolio management. So did that for a while and learned different skill sets there. After doing that for a little bit of time, the organization had an opportunity for us to move out to China, and there I switched back over to medical and was the head of medical for Asia, all with UCB, and had a great time there. And then after almost 3 years in China, we jumped back to Europe for our last rotation. And in that one, switched back over to commercial and was the global business lead for rheumatoid arthritis, our women of childbearing age initiatives in pediatrics. And then our journey changed to coming back to the US. And I had an opportunity to join Sanofi Genzyme at the time and come back to the US, initially heading up North America rheumatology and then global rheumatology, but then switched over to lead their medical operations and effectiveness group worldwide. And so looking at what you have in terms of growth, opportunity, impact, leading organization, and then had the opportunity to join Biogen. And then again, in a medical capacity as the head of North America Medical for Biogen. Had a phenomenal time at Biogen and just loved that opportunity. Was there for 4 years, an incredible team, Chad, obviously, where we got to know each other. And then there was an opportunity of what do I want to do next? And there was this incredible opportunity with Xenon, and we're roughly 2 years away from commercialization, and it became an opportunity of an organization that I could come help from the capacity of build and the capacity of get ready for what it takes to move into commercialization. And it's part of the topics today, right? It's what does it take to be successful in this space? How do you get ready for those things, and how do you help people be ready for that? Is that aspect of leadership development, the aspect of succession planning, and then just having an impact in what you're doing in medical affairs, which is certainly an area of passion for me.
Let's dig into this. Yeah, I could take this so many different directions, even beyond, what we were initially wanting to talk about. We'll have to set it for another day. But with this, one of the things that we like to equip our listeners with is just a sneak peek about what are the key takeaways that you want the listeners to make sure that they walk away with from this. So would you mind just sharing a couple of those before we get going in?
Yeah. First, I think out of the two topics we're going to hit on is very much on leadership development and on succession planning. When I think of those, you've got an element of the leadership development is something that has to be personal, it has to be intentional, and it should always be ongoing. It's surprising how much people don't take that intentionality to it.
Huh.
The part that has to go along with that, Chad, is there are critical mindset shifts that leaders have to go through as they go through different stages. Like when you say, I want to lead what? And there's this progression that you go to from leading self to leading others to leading across an enterprise. And you have to focus in on different things as you go through that. As part of that, there's a complement to it, of course, which is succession planning. And succession planning, a lot of times people think that succession planning is about replacement. It's not. Succession planning is about readiness. What are you doing to make sure that people are ready for potential opportunities? And you have to be able to balance all of that together and how you're developing people, how are you getting them ready for that? And I hope those are the things that we're going to touch on. And as we close, I will 100% issue a challenge out to every leader that's listening on this call. So I look forward to that at the end.
Well, if that doesn't keep people around for this conversation, I'm not sure what would. So this is great. Okay, all right. So let's dig in then. So leadership development, we'll start there. So, just in our interactions, right? I do know that you believe that leaders need to put in the work, and it does take effort, both from those that are leading others, as well as leaders that are trying to develop as well, from an individual component as well, to continually grow. So how do you personally live that belief, and then why do you think that that's so important?
So I think it starts with what I said in terms of, you have to take it as personal, and you have to be intentional, and you have to be ongoing about it. You touched a little bit about it at the beginning, which is, I dedicate or I commit myself to saying that I am going to read 20 books in a year. Those 20 titles, they're all over the place. It's not like I'm just reading business books and self-development books and everything else. But it's still an aspect of I am committing to something, and it's a combination of things that I enjoy and things that I like to learn about. So I make it personal by making sure that I'm leading by learning. People should be able to see that I am taking that kind of approach. I am learning and adapting things every day and things that we do. And it somewhat creates for individuals a little bit, I hope, of permission and encouragement that they should do the same, right? It's that journey of kind of where you're going to learn. What I have found has made the biggest difference for me in a work capacity is I really like to learn through observation, and then what I would call curated adoption, where when you're in meetings with other leaders and different meetings that you tend to be in, how much are you paying attention to what's going on around you, rather than just living in the moment of what are you going to say in that meeting, but really observing the behaviors of other leaders. And when you're seeing how they act, there's always something that you could take away from that. It doesn't mean that you have to copy them, right? It has to be genuine to who you are as an individual. But if you ask yourself that kind of concept of what's worth adopting and how can I make that mine, and you decide which of those pieces you want to bring into who you are, that helps you. And you tie those two together, it's that aspect of kind of like I said, is, I'm a curious person,
Yeah.
and my curiosity drives my learning. Examples that I can give you out of that is I was fascinated with the topic of metacognition. And the topic of metacognition, which is basically thinking about thinking. What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I observing? What am I noticing? What am I wondering? Any of those times that you can start to think a little deeper around that, great. As I got comfortable with that concept, it just made me more curious. And then it became, why do people behave the way that they do?
Yeah.
So it took me down a learning path of learning about behavioral economics. Then it took me down a path of how emotions are made. Then it took me about a path of like, what are we seeking in those situations? Is it pleasure? Is it growth? Is it the elements of discomfort? So it's like how emotions are made, the molecule of more, and how dopamine controls things that we do. So the more that you feed into it, and then try and pull those all together and say, all right, now what do I do with this? Can I now bring that into an organization? Can I bring that into a leadership team and help my leadership teams and the people that I work with? How do I help them develop? And so part of that, yeah, I brought it in very intentional. The most recent experience I had with that, I took a leadership team through a learning journey that turned into a component of actual journaling.
Yeah.
And I personally thought it was amazing. If you ever have any of those folks on as guests, they might tell you it was a little bit of torture for them. But it wasn't a journaling about self-expression. It was being able to take pause and really be intentional about reflecting and sharing and understanding what growth we've all been on together in a very open, discussion, very candid discussion, and very vulnerable discussions. And it really brought up elements of how you work, what are your values, what are the team dynamics we're trying to achieve, and got you to a better state of self-awareness for all of us. I learned through that journey just as much as the team did. So that's kind of how I live it. It's why I think it's so important. And then when you see that translate into the daily business, you see how they affect that with their leaders and the people that they're managing. And you end up having that kind of multiplier effect.
I love that. And I think I took so much from that. I was like writing down like I'm gonna be curated adoption. Because I love that concept, but I feel like I do that. And I think it's important for people to say, I don't have to, this is such a great idea, but I don't have to do whatever it is identically as this other person did. I can curate it to make it mine.
Yeah.
And then, when you were talking about, I think this is one of the problems, outside of just leadership, but everybody is taking the time. We all have so much on our plates right now, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't have too much on your plate, I don't know what you're not doing with your life. But to tell the people who are working with you and for you, I'm commanding you to slow down for a minute and reflect and journal. Because I feel like sometimes we're all in such a hurry to get all of these things done, and we do them in sort of it becomes half-assery, excuse my English.
100%.
And so, but yeah, and you can't, it's like I'm doing this all and I don't really know why I'm doing it and what's the impact. So I love that you put people through that exercise, and I may have to talk to you offline later about that, because it may be something I need to do for my group too. So through all of this, what do you feel like are some of the traits or skill sets that are critical for leaders to be constantly sort of massaging and working on and refining throughout their careers?
Yeah, it's good question, Mary. I think when you just listening to you reflect on that piece, there is a component of slowing down a little bit to reflect on what your journey has been. What are you getting out of it? How is it impacting you, and how is it impacting those around you? it pays off in dividends. It really does. It's Chad, you teased about like, listen, how do you go with like, do you know how special forces holds off how to breathe longer, right? That we started
Yeah.
at the beginning of that piece. It's that same kind of motto, right, that special forces teams have, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Like leadership is some element of that. Like if you slow down a little bit to make sure that you've taken some time, things will go smoother. And when those things go smoother, you'll actually be faster as an organization, as a team, as the things you're trying to have an impact on. Um, to the traits and skills, that leaders need to have, Mary, back to your question on that one. I think it starts a little bit of what I said in the intro. What are you leading? Like leading what? And if we can, I'll take a few minutes to kind of break down what I consider to be like this progression that you go through in a leadership journey. I try to think of them as turning around and saying there's multiple different steps that people will go through, right? And depending on where they achieve what goals in their career. There's your leading yourself. There's a component of leading others. Then if you get to a point where you're leading managers, that's a different story. You could be leading multiple teams, and then at some point you could be leading either a function or a much broader organization. The traits and things that you're focusing on at each one of those levels is different and has to be intentional to the state at which you're in. If you're talking about leading yourself, that's all about the discipline of self-awareness. Where are you in terms of managing yourself, your mindset, your habits, and quite honestly, which we see a lot, your emotional regulation? Because it becomes that component of early in that space. How well do you know yourself? How well do you know your values? And do you know your triggers in terms of how you show up under stress
Yeah.
before you start trying to lead somebody with any element of authenticity? How can you say you're going to help somebody get to that point if you haven't done that work yourself? If you then shift it to say, all right, now we're going to the next stage, we're going to be leading others. That for me is this kind of shift that you go to, but you're shifting from influencing as an individual contributor to a driver of empathy. And that may sound a little like, really? It is. If you are now leading others, the skill set that you should spend time on is how good are you at the element of empathy. Can you listen deeply? Do you understand where the people that are bringing you challenges that they are facing, how well do you know what they're actually dealing with? And can you help coach them through it? Because either you've been there, you can give them clear and candid feedback in a kind way that helps them grow. Okay, how do you want to do that? So that's what you're doing when you're leading others. You get to the point, if you're leading managers, your shift and what you should be focusing on as a leader has now changed. Now you're at the point of this is all about the skill of basically building a multiplier effect. It's multiplication, right? You're leading others to have a broader impact. You're no longer controlling outcomes. You've got to get really comfortable with not being the one that's doing the work and building systems that you're driving accountability, you're empowering decision making for those managers, and you're shifting your focus on what you're doing to develop them and be able to start driving that component, right? As we talked about, and then you grow past leading that to now you're leading multiple teams. Great. Imagine that progression that you've done. You know your self-awareness piece. You now are good at the empathy piece. You're starting to have a multiplier effect. Now you're leading multiple teams. A skill you have to grow in that is now, we'll call it more the art of alignment. How are you driving alignment across your functional teams? Because if not, you end up with teams that every team tells you that they're perfect snowflakes, right? Like, no, it's different. You don't understand me. I'm totally different. It's unique in my team. It's like, no.
Oh my
Now
gosh,
getting
I've
to
heard this before, Lee. I've
I
heard
know
this
you have.
before. I've heard this before. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
The art of alignment. I pushed you to it. Stop telling me you were a snowflake, Chad. You know we had to go to some element of an art of
Right.
alignment.
That's right. That's right.
He
Go
does
ahead.
kind of got a little bit of a
Oh, stop,
snowflake
stop,
look.
stop, stop.
Okay,
Anyway, go
sorry.
And
go ahead. The art of alignment, Lee. I
no,
didn't
no,
mean to
no.
interject.
And then from there, if you get to that piece, right, and now you start getting to the point that now you're really driving or building a broader organization, or you're leading a function. Their leadership aspects of what you need to be able to kind of work on and the skill set is you're now have, let's call it the burden of perspective.
Hmm.
You constantly have a different perspective, and that perspective is at an enterprise level. You're not worried about your function and what your function is doing. You're now thinking about what the business as a whole needs when you're leading organizations, right? You get to a point where, as ways that I even describe myself, I'm an enterprise leader first and a functional leader second. I'm here to help the overall organization succeed. I just happen to be from medical affairs.
Yeah.
And when you
Hmm.
start thinking about that, you lead from a different view. You lead from an enterprise lens. You need to make sure that at that point you're creating vision, you're creating clear values for where we're living. It's organized and aligned to the totality of the organization. And there you have the opportunity to start to help impact culture at a broader level, right? Where can you impact the culture that we're trying to create for the whole company? So those skill sets, I know is a very long kind of tangent we went down. It's like those are all skills that you have to develop, but depending on where you are in your leadership journey, don't try to learn all of those things at once. Try to focus in where you are. If you're leading yourself right now, work on the discipline of self-awareness. You're a first-time leader that's leading other managers. How good are you at that multiplier effect with your managers? So as you dig in that way, that's where I would say, please spend time thinking about where you are in your journey and what's the skill set that you need to develop now. Because once you develop it, it'll make you successful when you get to your next stage.
So I was thinking about, um, I've been like, I'm a ferocious note taker. So, I mean, it really does look like you have to master, I don't know if you say master, but master some of these things before you can really transition to that next role in leadership. Um, and so I guess I kind of have two questions. One is, I'm sure you've had great mentors
I have.
in your life
Yep.
who have helped you develop some of these intangible abilities, and then in turn be able to take that and mentor other
Yeah.
either aspiring leaders or um, leaders in progress or in process,
Yeah.
to get from one step to the other. So, I was kind of wondering how that role of mentorship to you and from you
Okay.
has played out.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's a great bridge between those topics, right? The aspect of, what are those skills that you need to work on as you're getting ready for next levels? Every one of those skills you should continue to refine over time. As your perspective changes, your leadership journey changes, you still need to work on all those things.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly evolving, right? Um, when you have that opportunity then of, okay, how do you help others grow in that capacity? It's, again, I guess it's that aspect of intentionality of what it is that you want to bring to the table. I've had amazing mentors in my career, some that were super hard on me, and they definitely pushed me very, very hard. Others that challenged me to pause and slow down and get in my own head a little bit more. And I think between those, when I started to think, okay, now I have that kind of multiplier effect capacity, I want to start mentoring other people. It was, where do you start to build that, and what's your intentionality to it, right? Chad knows me quite well. I'm a big fan of the rule of three, so everything in my head just magically buckets into three things all the time, and the next thing is three things, and this thing is three things. As I built through that, I started trying to figure out, who do I want to mentor and where do I want to focus that energy, right? And so what I ended up doing in that was, first, it was, I want to be able to mentor, and where I spend my time now mentoring is at three different levels. I mentor individuals that are senior directors or executive directors that are trying to get their first executive role, they're ready for a VP role, but they're not quite there yet. I spend time mentoring a first or second year VP, and then I spend time mentoring somebody that's in that third year of being a VP. And each one of them, my thought process to that and where it helps me in my own development is, again, the aspect of, what did they need? How am I going to coach and mentor them? And how could it actually help me in my own growth and learning, right? So I'll start with one of them, and then I'm happy to go through all three because it's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. If we think
May I
about,
ask a question before you get into
please,
that?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're preparing to mentor any one of these three groups, do they come to you and say, "This is what I want to work on," or do you guys sit down and decide together, "I think this is the area you should work on first"? Then we try. Like, how do you go about that?
I will have people that will reach out and say they have an interest in wanting to be mentored.
Mhm.
I will only take on 3 mentees per year, and I commit to that individual for at least a 1-year period of time to truly be their mentor. So I don't take on more than that. So sometimes, if you will, I'll have a little bit of a waiting list of people that want to be on that one. And some of the initial conversation with them is me listening and trying to see what perspective they're bringing to the table, and then trying to figure out, all right, there's kind of the plan in place of where I want to take them in certain things, depending on which category they fit in. Listen to what they're interested in trying to grow with, and then see if we can make those two things kind of come together. So,
Okay.
and the example can be that component of, if I have a senior director, executive director that's trying to get ready for a first executive VP role, that theme, if you will, is, this is someone that's now moving from being some form of a function leader to having a strategic voice in the organization. So if that's something that they're moving to go from senior director, executive director to a VP, what do they need? What they're going to need over time is, they're going to need to know how to move from execution excellence to the concept of strategic influence. Like, they have to start being influential within an organization as an executive. That means that cross-functional conversations need to look differently. That means that their enterprise priorities and understanding enterprise priorities has to be different for them. And then they have to be able to shape those things, not drive them, but shape them. So how do I coach them? How do you help somebody in that situation? I have ability to get those people in to higher level meetings so that they can see how some of those higher level meetings happen before they're promoted. Get them into those situations and then have a conversation as a debrief. What did you notice? What did you observe? What would you have done differently? What would you have said differently? What did you pick up out of that conversation? And then see if there's opportunities where you can find them some sort of element of ownership in something that's a cross-functional initiative, and help kind of coach them through that and give them a little bit of visibility for those outcomes. But that helps me as well, right? As part of my own development of, why do I coach and mentor at that level? It forces me to kind of codify my leadership thinking. I have to think about intentionality to that. It's really impressive to help me spot emerging blind spots that I see either in the organization or in team strategy. Because as you hear and listen to some of these things, you can see that. And then to some element is I'm thinking broader enterprise needs, coaching and mentoring someone at that level. I'm helping somewhat influence what future leaders may look like within the organization that I know are going to be aligned to the overall enterprise needs. And it's a way that I can help the organization that way. That's one type of approach to it. If I take that to someone that's in a first or second year VP role, that's a very different conversation. This is somebody who is now an executive. They're learning how to be one. And your first year as an executive, yeah, if you think you're all hot and you think you're all that in a bag of chips, yeah, just wait. It's going to be one of those things like you got a lot to learn and plenty of mistakes to come into play there. For those folks, you're talking about now, remember, they're now a strategic contributor, right? They're now they're a strategic influencer. How do we help and how can I help a first or second year VP start thinking about being an integrator across portfolio? That's a totally different coaching approach. That's a different thing that you have to think about. So what do they need? What does a first or second year VP really need? They need to evolve a little bit of how they move from what's the silo of what they are accountable for within their executive role to truly understanding the interdependencies across the rest of the executive team. How are they managing that piece? How good are they at navigating ambiguity? And quite honestly, some of the enterprise politics that happen, right? We're not gonna, if anybody thinks that they're not there, you're living in ignorance. They always exist. And how do you help them navigate some of those things so that you deal better with ambiguity? You know how to help them with trade-offs, and you make sure that they understand better what's happening at the executive committee and how well do you understand the priorities of the executive committee? Because that C-suite, their priorities, when you're a first or second year VP, a lot of those things trickle down to being your priorities. How well do you really understand those things? So for those folks, again, you have to be intentional in how you coach and how you mentor. There, I don't ask them functional questions at all. I'm not interested in your function anymore, Chad. In that situation, I start asking you, are you married? Enterprise level questions. How are you thinking through these things at an enterprise level? I find opportunities where I can come join and watch them lead cross-functional meetings and then give them real, proximal to the event, candid tactical feedback on what they did. What was your presence? What was the language that you used? How did you influence? Do you think you had your audience? Were you listening for these things? And how do you kind of shape where do you want to take this next? And then where I have ability and responsibility in that mentor relationship is how do I now help that first or second year VP connect with peers and other functions? Because they need to start building out a different type of network. And as they're building that network and they're learning to navigate this, that first to second year executive, there's also a very good conversation that happens and you have to have this safe space to be able to do it, of who are you becoming now? There's an evolution to their identity as a leader. When they gain that responsibility and they gain the accountabilities, do they really know who they're becoming now? And is that who they want to be? And I think that piece, Mary, ties back to that component of have you paused and given it that thought?
Yeah.
I can't do that at scale. I can't do that with 20 people. I can do that with 3 people that I make time for this. And again, all of those, it's how does it help me? Because I'm still on a learning journey, right? it helps remind me of where my own comfort zones are now versus where they were or what made me uncomfortable previously. Um, it's a really good way to get a much better pulse on how cross-functional dynamics are working in your organization. Because again, that first, second year VP, a lot of the interdependencies they now have to lead through and manage. It's a great way to get a pulse check of what's happening across functions, where I may not have that, but I'm getting it through an extra set of years, right? And then as you start pushing and challenging and helping them go through that, it helps you also think through like, hey, it's some of the big picture issues that I'm dealing with. How am I bringing in my leadership team to that? Where is my opportunity to delegate some of those big picture issues to grow and develop talent? So it's that kind of format. We don't have to go into it. The third year plus VP, that's a whole other fun and excitement piece because that's a enterprise scale leader. And then you just get into different conversations at that one. But so that hopefully that gives you a little bit of the flavor of kind of how you go through some of those things.
Yeah, I think one of the things, well, several things stood out. I think one of the things, number one, and this is again one of the reasons why we started this show. It switching from an individual contributor to is about leading yourself, as you just discussed. But so many times we get stuck in that. We feel like we can automatically just plug and play that when we're starting to lead others, right? And I've seen people time and time again fail at this because they just it requires different skill sets, or even just to prioritize other skill sets rather, and really kind of press in. It requires a shift that often doesn't happen. Also, if I think we're all guilty at times, the easy road is to just be told what to do, or right. I mean, I think that's one of the
Development
things
is
that I'm here,
hard. Like,
and
yeah,
that's one of the things I've appreciated. I mean, the stuff that you call your other leaders to is a lot of work. It's not busy work. I mean, but it's a lot of work, and it's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
thinking. And um, to be an impactful leader, you have to be able to think, right? And I think
yeah,
that
100%.
sometimes, like individual contributor role, you can get it down to the point where it's on your coast. I wouldn't say coasting, right? But in
Yeah,
essence, it's easy. You don't have to put a lot of energy into it. You can do things without much prep work, and um, then you get lost when you get into these types of
yeah,
roles and
yeah,
ways, right? And then, so that's one thing. Another thing is, you mentioned, I think that there are elements of like the leadership, the enterprise mindset, and those types of things. To your point earlier, I don't think you grow out of those things, or you have to, each stage requires you to focus on one, I'm sorry, to only prioritize one versus the other, or even keep those in your mind. I think it really comes down to what's the area of focus, right, for that particular position that you're in. Like, even the individual, I want my individual contributors to think about the enterprise mindset, right,
yeah,
in how they respond. Now it's obviously at a much smaller level, but still. And how do you start really kind of developing those skills? I mean, those that actually do that in that individual contributor role are one of the ones that actually stand out to me as, hey, this person has that leadership component because they're
yeah,
already thinking through some of those things as well
yeah.
too, right? So anyway, I loved how you broke all this down.
I,
Really good.
I mean, Chad, the way I look at that, it's I guess kind of a little bit of two things that I read out of that, right? One, it is a component of you've got to make time for this, and
Yeah.
my personal favorite motto out of that one, which is you'll never find time, you have to make time.
Yep.
And so if it's really important, you've got to make time for that. When you're going to grow folks in that direction, are you making time for that? Are you being intentional? And I love what you said in terms of there are people that do that already at the individual level, and they start thinking in that space, they're thinking a little differently than just the plug and play. Um, those are the people that's like, I love that as call it a segue into the next topic, right? Which is like, those are the people that you pay attention to that you say, ooh, that's somebody that we need to put a little bit of extra effort into. Because when you think about succession planning, and it's not about replacement, it's about readiness, those are people that you're going to say, are they ready now?
Yeah.
Look, here's somebody who's naturally attracted to thinking enterprise.
Yeah.
Let's take that skill set and take it to a totally different level.
Yeah.
Let's see how well they do with us. And then you can start to grow them and coach them and be intentional in what you're doing there.
Okay, let's do you set the segue. So what it would don't even have to set it up, right? So like why or now I don't think you should be a co-host now as well too. Mary, you might be threatened with that or you might kick me away. I'm not sure exactly what will happen with this, but
Why would I be the one getting replaced?
Yeah.
I don't know. You're right. You you do
Well,
so much
I'm
to make this work.
we'll take. I've got Chad in his own head right now. He's thinking the metacognitive way. What am
That's
I
right. That's
feeling? What am
right.
I thinking? What am I observing? What am I
That's right.
wondering?
That's
It's
right.
okay.
So talking about the planning, right, and the importance of it. So what really, Lee, what do you see the risk of neglecting this or just not even choosing to acknowledge it, right? So
So,
what happens as a consequence?
um, I'll give you my take on what I've seen it at multiple different organizations, and I've seen it in different ways, and it has different aspects of how it's managed or how departments feel about it. And the this is specific to succession planning, right? How do you bring that really to fruition? Um, at its best, I think across our industry, there are unfortunately too many organizations that they're just lazy when it comes to succession planning. Like I said, it's easier to just plug and play and you know what, that's a tomorrow problem. I don't need to spend time worrying about that. We can always go out and hire that in. If that's your philosophy, I mean, that's certainly a philosophy to have. The risk of not doing this, again, if you could look at it at its best situation of what does that look like, I don't know, change your mindset and start thinking about it as business continuity insurance. Like, if you are developing and thinking about succession planning, you are de-risking your business. If I have somebody who is ready to take over in a specific role, should somebody win the lottery or move on to their next adventure, then I just de-risked my business. And I de-risked the business for the organization. So if you're not doing it at all, well, then if you're comfortable living without any insurance, go for it. If you'd like to have business continuity insurance, devote your time to some succession planning pieces. The part where I think it helps for me is also if you're thinking about succession planning and how do you get somebody ready, you're looking at this as, is there somebody who's truly ready now? Great. How do you help identify those individuals that are truly ready now? And what do you need to grow to get them ready now? That's the business continuity piece. If you're thinking succession planning with the concept of it might take us a year or two to grow someone to whatever it may be, then you have an opportunity to start thinking about, are you growing people for the skills and jobs that, I don't want to say don't exist yet, but are you anticipating where those skills are going to be needed 2 to 3 years from now? And if you're doing that with intentionality and saying, what are we in our business going to need 2 years from today? And who are we trying to get ready for that? Should that become a possibility? Think of everything we've been looking at. Like, okay, are you incorporating AI into where you are? If you're moving from pre-commercialization to post-commercialization, are you thinking about where you're going to grow skill sets and real-world evidence? As our entire industry continues to go, what are you devoting towards understanding of personalized medicine? So there's the technical aspects of what you may help people grow, and then the behavioral aspects that we all chatted about. And for me, when you do succession planning and do it thoroughly, it's a sign of a healthy culture in your group, because people know, like, we're really doing this and we have intention to hope to get you ready for a new opportunity. Worst case scenario, you take that opportunity somewhere else. Great. I'm super thrilled for you. I had a part in getting you ready for that.
Yeah.
We all do better as an industry that way. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That was actually the question I was about to ask, is like, because you kind of alluded to the person who was already ready,
Yeah.
or they got ready faster. I know there are some organizations out there that they may not be able to create something for somebody, but they also don't want to lose their talent now, that would not have the selfless attitude that you have. And I know that Chad has also. I just complimented you. I'm sure you're surprised, but
I am,
that
but
is
thank
you,
you. Thank you.
so that was what I was going to ask, like, what do you do if, if, if they're ready now for something
Yeah.
organizationally you aren't going to have for 2 years? And if it's that they got to pursue it somewhere else and you're 100% supportive of that, I love that.
Well, not only that, right, Mary, but there are plenty of opportunities where people tend to disperse and then reunite at different organizations, right? We live in a small industry that people think is much larger, but we know so many folks that we've worked with across so many different organizations. Great. If I can help ensure that as an organization, we are building and moving through, how are we developing people with intentionality, that at worst case scenario, they move on to a new opportunity, it's still a win, because you never know when they're going to come back to you in a different capacity.
Yeah.
That's great. And to some, I don't know, maybe the personal side of that is, at least for me, maybe that's a little bit of whatever you would hope is, if you start asking the question of what has been your impact and your legacy and what you've brought to a group or an industry, it's not an element of control of like, oh, I don't want to do this because I might lose this resource.
Yeah.
I would much rather finish my career knowing that I helped a number of individuals move on to help other individuals, who in turn helped us do better for the patients we're all trying to serve. That grounds me to my greater sense of purpose of why I joined the industry in the first place.
Right.
So that comes back, and it helps. And if you do it that way, you think about it that way, it makes it smoother, it makes it easier, and I think you have great success with it that way.
So I'm going to say something that I can say, because I'm not maybe it's because I'm not in the position that you're in or things like that. But I mean, I would just expand a little bit further and say, you know what? If we're being honest and we look back 20 years from now or whatnot, the company that you worked for, that you invested, are likely not going to remember your name specifically 20 years down the road. But I can guarantee you, this investments that you've made in people, they will remember, and the impact is much more profound, right? And it reaches far beyond just the company. I mean, the company could close down for goodness sake, if it's a startup, right? So you never know. And it's not that you don't want the best in your company, to be clear, but I mean, you have a chance to really change the trajectory of others, and that is much more rewarding to me than it is, and I think to you as well, Lee, than trying to hold on to something, right?
I think there's a beautiful balance in both, Chad. Like, there's that component of, like I said, you can make it an element of, what are you doing for business continuity?
Yes.
Which helps your organization wherever you are. Great.
Yep.
That's fantastic. That's something that I'm making sure that exists, and I have that continuity for the business. And right, the yes and I'm growing leaders. And that component of growing those other leaders, like, that will benefit, whether it's with the organization or the industry as a whole. I'll take both.
So, Lee, I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier, that I really think is the glue. You talk about it's reflective of the culture that you have, right? And that you're trying to set. And I think for this to be successful, right? You have to be able to create an element of trust, right? For people to be vulnerable, like you talked about earlier.
Yep.
Um, if that piece is not there, I think that is going to limit the success of putting these types of plans together. And then also let's even just think about where we are now and this new generation of new employees, right? As they're coming on, I mean, 3 years oftentimes is the max. So because they get antsy or they're always looking, the grass is always greener, et cetera.
Yeah.
If you have this type of thing in place, it is that business continuity component as well too. They feel that they're being poured into,
Yeah.
even if it's tough and hard work, but that's going to make the business even stronger, right? So anyway, those are just some commentary of or reflecting on some of the things you just shared.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I can give you an example of where I've seen it work at its absolute best, right?
Okay.
We had a scenario just recently, actually, over the last year, where the intentionality of making sure that we go through and really do true succession planning, right? And I'll give you some of those, call them the pitfalls of what other organizations may do, or when the process doesn't go on. But it's not like treat it when the organizations do it wrong, they just treat it as an event and it's not a process. Like it's an ongoing process of what you're doing with these folks. And when you do that, then it's not rushed, it's not reactive, it's thoughtful, it's intentional. And as you know from organizations that I have the great opportunity to help lead, I make sure that it goes all the way through the entire organization. It's organizations many times just stop at a very, very high level and they're like, oh, we're only going to look at director plus or VP plus for some of the
Yeah.
succession planning. I think you've got to be looking at your entire organization with that. And then the example of where it works at its best. When you have that opportunity to bring it into a component where you say that importance and focus on, is someone ready? If you can get to the situation that you identify single ready now candidates for certain roles, that you say, look, that skill set, we've grown them to where they are. And these other folks, they're going to be ready 1 to 2 years. Fantastic. The ones who are going to be ready 1 to 2 years, do all the things that we talked about in terms of depending on where they are, their level, what's
Yep.
the skill set, the behavioral aspects, grow them, learn them, give them opportunities. Love it. Those ready now people, if you have been intentional, you have done this consistently, and you have demonstrated that this is something that you do fully and thoroughly, your HR business partners will say, I've never seen anybody do this to that level. And if you find yourself in an opportunity that then you can enact execution of that succession plan, it's probably one of the greatest days you can have. And we had that this past year where we had one person in the organization that was ready to take on a new leadership role. Fantastic. We had one ready now leader that was ready to take over that person's job.
Yeah.
That created a vacancy. We had one ready now candidate that could take that person's job, which created another vacancy. And we had one ready now candidate that was ready to take that role, leaving
How
you.
often does that happen?
It was amazing. And so first, what ended up happening was the leader who got to announce that this was going on, we teased dramatically that she had an Oprah Winfrey day, because it was like, you get a promotion, you get a promotion, and you get a promotion. And we just promoted a ton of people in that situation. And because we had been that intentional in the succession planning, and we knew that these were ready now candidates, we got approval from HR that we did not have to post the role. They did not have to interview, and the people were appointed directly into the role. Now, if you want to talk about impact to a business, you know how much time, energy,
Yeah.
Like the resource that was saved to not have to try and go through all of that, and to know that you had people that were truly ready to succeed in that role, and you executed 4 promotions instantaneously to then create an opportunity to bring someone in that now is, hey, let's go get a newer, fresh, young talent at a lower place in the organization that we can grow. We did that all in one go. And it was because we had been that intentional in succession planning. And it was probably one of the most fun things I've done in the last year, without a doubt. It was just incredible when it got executed, and just to see folks react to that moment of like, yep, here you go.
That's got to be a defining moment of your career in many ways, right? To actually see it play out in the way that it did, and for the people that have gone through that process, that you took them on that journey that
Yeah.
seemed to be frustrating or too much time commitment, whatever that might be. It's almost like Moses getting to see the promised land, right? I mean, versus just and getting to experience it and
Yeah.
see it, and that kind of really kind of put a nice bow on that whole journey.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And when we announced it and we announced the changes, we made sure that the entire organization knew that this was succession planning in action.
Yeah.
Like the rollout was not, hey, let me tell you who's in this role now. It was truly this is what succession planning in action looks like. And we rolled it out exactly that way. This person has done that because they were there and this person was ready. They got appointed. This one got appointed. This one got appointed. And we made it sure of like the appointment because of all the work they had done to be ready to take on that job. Yeah, it was great. It was really fun.
Okay. All right. We could talk for hours. I know. There's as we're getting close to wrap this up. Really good conversation. You just mentioned a great example of how this worked really well. So
Yeah.
what advice would you give to leaders who want to take this to the next level in their organization?
Yeah. The first I mentioned, which is if you can and where you can, your ability to see if you can denote who is a single ready now individual. If you have 4 or 5 single ready now individuals, you will put yourself in a situation where you have to do the interviews,
Okay.
right? Because you've got multiple. But if you really get to a point where you say, look, Chad is the most ready now person, Mary for this other role is the single ready now candidate for this, and you have unanimous buy-in from your own leadership team that we are all in alignment that individual is the most ready now person, that's what you'll need with your HR business partners to say, I'm ready to enact the succession plan. On those folks that are ready 1 to 2 years, don't sit around on the sidelines trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do with these individuals? If that is your business continuity growth development piece, you should pick 1 to 2 actions that you and your leadership team are committing to in terms of how you're going to engage and help grow that individual. It has to be very intentional. What are you doing? What's the skill? What are you trying to go after? So if you guys can focus on those 2 things, without a doubt, that would be the best advice I could give anybody who's running this.
Finally, one thing to wrap it up. You mentioned in the beginning a call to action. So what are you calling the leaders that are listening in whatever level that they're in? What's that charge, Lee?
Well, I would say as we close, thank you again for having me on. It's been fun. We could definitely talk for hours and hours on all of these topics and more. Look, if I think about this, right, and you brought it at the beginning, which is the beauty of what we do in medical affairs and medical, and it's always been obviously a love and passion of mine. Enterprise or not, there's something special about medical.
Yeah.
And with that, it's, the science is always going to matter, but the people who carry it forward are going to matter even more. So the challenge that I teased with at the beginning would be for your listeners out there that have responsibility for leading a team and are leading others. Here's my challenge to you. I'm going to challenge you to identify the one person on your team that you would want to take over your role. Do you know who that could potentially be? And when you've picked that person, I challenge you to make time. Don't find time. Make time to spend at least 1 hour with them in the next week talking about and working on their future. Go see where that conversation brings you. See how good you are at listening. See where your own self-awareness is. See where your empathy component is. And then figure out in what you're listening with that individual, are you going to be able to help them? And what is your commitment to do that? So go try that. See how those conversations go. Feel free to send me a note on LinkedIn or a message or anything else to tell me how that conversation went, and see if that doesn't pay back to you in spades.
Love it, Lee. Thank you for, I know you're busy with the recent transition. You're always busy, but you made time for us. You made time for the listeners. And like, we may never know the impact that it gets to have, right? So, but definitely know that it is there. You've certainly impacted me, and I'm glad I got a chance to, in the platform that I have, to be able to share that with others as well too, just to give them a little taste of what I get to, how I get to learn from you. So thanks for making time today. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you both. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. That wraps up today's conversation. MSL Lead Chronicles. Remember, leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders learn from leaders. And with that, lead well.